My estranged family showed up at my $1 million house after 8 years of no contact when they found out about my business success, so I gave them a tour of everything they called a failure before kicking them out and going no contact forever. I, 38M, grew up in a middle-class family in Phoenix. My parents always pushed the traditional path: good grades, college degree, stable office job with benefits. My younger sister Molly, 33F, followed this perfectly. She got into Arizona State, graduated with a business degree, and landed a job at a corporate firm. My parents treated her like she walked on water. Every phone call home was about Molly's latest promotion or her new apartment in Scottsdale. I was different. Since I was 12, I spent every weekend at my grandfather's auto repair shop. He taught me everything about engines, transmissions, and bodywork. While other kids played video games, I rebuilt carburetors and learned welding. My parents saw this as a phase that would pass once I got serious about school. When I turned 18, I had a decision to make. I'd been accepted to community college for automotive technology, but my parents wanted me to pursue a 4-year degree in engineering or business. The fight started immediately. My dad would lecture me about how mechanics don't make real money and that I'd spend my life with dirty hands working for other people. My mom worried about what her friends would think when they asked what their son did for work. The breaking point came during a family dinner when I was 19. I just finished my certification program and gotten hired at a premium European car dealership. The starting pay was $45,000, which seemed decent to me. When I shared the news, my dad shook his head and said I was wasting my potential. My mom asked if it was too late to enroll in real college. Molly, who was making $35,000 at her entry-level corporate job, got praised for having a career with growth potential while my job was dismissed as a dead end. That summer, things got worse. I'd saved up enough money to move out and was looking at apartments. My parents saw this as another mistake. They wanted me to stay home, save money, and use that time to reconsider college. When I signed a lease anyway, my dad stopped talking to me for 2 months. Family dinners became awkward affairs where Molly's achievements were celebrated while my work was ignored. The final straw happened when I was 22. I'd been promoted to senior technician and was making $65,000 a year. I'd also started doing side jobs on weekends, rebuilding classic cars for collectors. One project, a 1967 Mustang restoration, earned me $15,000 in profit. I was proud of the work and excited to share it with my family. At Molly's birthday dinner, I brought photos of the finished Mustang. The craftsmanship was beautiful. I'd spent months on every detail. When I showed the pictures, my dad glanced at them briefly and asked when I was going to stop playing with cars and get serious about my future. My mom added that she hoped I wasn't planning to do this forever because women wouldn't want to date a mechanic. Molly, who'd just gotten engaged to her boyfriend Drake, now 35M, mentioned that Drake made $80,000 in marketing and owned a condo. The implication was clear: this was what success looked like, not my car projects. I stopped visiting after that. Phone calls became less frequent, then stopped entirely. When Molly got married 3 years later, I wasn't asked to be in the wedding party. I attended as a regular guest and sat with extended family members I barely knew. During the reception speech, Molly thanked everyone who supported her through college and her career journey. She mentioned my parents, her in-laws, several friends, and college professors. She didn't mention me. That was the last time I saw any of them. No Christmas visits, no birthday calls, no attempts to maintain contact. They seemed relieved not to have the family disappointment around. During these 8 years of silence, my life changed completely. The side business I'd started restoring classic cars grew steadily. Word spread among collectors, and I began getting requests for increasingly rare and valuable vehicles. I hired 2 employees, then 5, then 10. We moved from my garage to a proper facility with hydraulic lifts, paint booths, and specialized equipment. The business exploded during the pandemic. Wealthy people stuck at home wanted their dream cars restored, and they had money to spend. I was working on Ferraris, Porsches, and vintage Corvettes worth more than most people's houses. The profit margins were incredible because the work required skills that few people possessed. Last year, I bought a house. Not just any house, a custom-built place on 2 acres with a 4-car garage and a separate workshop. The property cost $850,000, which I paid in cash. I also bought myself a new truck, a fully loaded Ford F-250 that cost $75,000. The truck has my business name and logo on the sides, Martinez Classic Restorations. This is where things get interesting. 2 months ago, my cousin Elsa, 29F, was at a gas station and saw my truck. She recognized my name and took photos, which she posted on social media asking if anyone knew Marcus Martinez. Within hours, my family had found my business Instagram page, which shows photos of the cars I've restored, my facility, and occasionally my house and truck. The social media creeping started immediately. My mom sent a friend request on Facebook after 8 years of silence. Molly followed my business Instagram and started liking old posts from 2 years ago. My dad, who doesn't even use social media normally, created an Instagram account just to follow me. Then came the text messages. My mom sent a message saying she missed me and wanted to reconnect. Molly texted asking how I was doing and mentioning that she'd love to catch up. Even my dad, who'd barely spoken to me before I moved out, sent a message saying he was proud of what I'd accomplished. I ignored all of them. The timing was too obvious, and their previous 8 years of silence had shown me exactly how much I mattered to them. Yesterday morning, I was in my workshop rebuilding an engine when I heard cars pulling into my driveway. I looked outside and saw 2 vehicles, my parents' Honda Civic and a newer SUV I didn't recognize. 7 people got out, my parents, Molly, Drake, their 2 kids, ages 6 and 4, and my Aunt Felicia, 52F. I watched from the window as they walked around looking at my house and pointing at different features. Molly was taking pictures with her phone. Drake was clearly calculating property values. My mom kept straightening her hair and checking her reflection in the car window. I let them ring the doorbell 3 times before answering. When I opened the door, the reaction was immediate. My mom's eyes went wide as she took in my appearance. I'd filled out over the years and was wearing expensive work clothes. My dad actually stepped back like he was surprised. My mom spoke first, saying the house was beautiful and that they were so proud of what I'd built. The words sounded rehearsed, like she'd practiced them in the car. I asked what they wanted. Molly jumped in, explaining that they were in the area visiting friends and decided to stop by. This was obviously false since they live 4 hours away and had never mentioned any friends in my area during all the years we lived in the same city. My Aunt Felicia, who'd never shown interest in my life before, started asking detailed questions about my business. She wanted to know how many employees I had, what kind of cars I worked on, and how much I charged customers. The questions felt like an interrogation disguised as friendly interest. I invited them inside, mostly because I was curious about their real purpose. The house tour was awkward. They walked through each room making exaggerated comments about how nice everything was. Drake, who worked in marketing, kept asking about square footage and property taxes. Molly's kids ran around touching everything while she took more photos. In the kitchen, my mom opened cabinets and looked at my appliances. She commented on how expensive everything must have been. My dad examined my tools, which were visible through the window to my workshop. He mentioned that I must be doing well for myself. We sat in the living room, and the real conversation started. Molly brought up how much she missed having me in their lives. My parents talked about family being the most important thing. Aunt Felicia mentioned how proud my late grandfather would have been. Then Drake started talking about investment opportunities. He'd recently learned about cryptocurrency and real estate ventures that could help me diversify my income. He had connections who could help me make smart financial decisions. My mom shifted the conversation to Molly's situation. She mentioned that raising 2 kids was expensive, especially with daycare costs and saving for their education. Molly added that Drake's company had been cutting bonuses, making things tighter financially. The request finally came. They needed help with a down payment for a bigger house. Molly's family had outgrown their current place, but saving for a down payment while paying current expenses was challenging. They weren't asking for charity, they wanted to borrow money that they'd pay back once Drake's career recovered. The amount they mentioned was $75,000. Coincidentally, exactly what my truck had cost. I asked them when they'd last invited me to a family gathering. The question caught them off guard. Molly stammered something about everyone being busy. My mom mentioned that they'd tried to stay in touch but I'd been distant. I walked to my office and returned with a folder of documents. Inside were 8 years of family photos from their social media accounts. Birthday parties, holidays, graduations, vacation trips, dozens of family events where everyone had been invited except me. Molly's kids had never met me, despite living in the same state their entire lives. I showed them the photos one by one. Christmas mornings with everyone gathered except me. Molly's promotion celebration with extended family present. My parents' 30th anniversary party with cousins who lived in different states, but no invitation for me. My mom tried to explain that they'd assumed I wasn't interested in family events because I'd seemed distant after moving out. This was clearly false since they'd never actually invited me to find out. I told them I needed time to think about their request and asked them to leave. They exchanged worried glances but agreed. Molly hugged me goodbye and said she hoped we could rebuild our relationship regardless of the money situation. After they left, I sat in my workshop and thought about everything that had happened. 8 years of treating me like I didn't exist, followed by sudden interest once they discovered I had money. The timing couldn't be more obvious if they'd planned it. The worst part is that I actually have the money they need. My business generates enough profit that $75,000 wouldn't impact my lifestyle. But giving it to them would validate their behavior and prove that family relationships can be turned on and off based on financial benefit. I haven't responded to their follow-up texts yet. Molly sent a message thanking me for the visit and saying how much it meant to her kids to finally meet their uncle. My mom texted asking if I'd had time to consider helping Molly's family. Part of me wants to help because they are family, despite everything. But another part of me knows that if my business failed tomorrow, they'd disappear again just as quickly as they showed up. What would you do in this situation? Update 1. The response to my original post was overwhelming. Thousands of comments and messages from people sharing similar experiences with their own families. Reading through them helped me realize I wasn't alone in dealing with relatives who only show interest when money is involved. After my family's visit, I decided to wait and see what their follow-up behavior would reveal about their true intentions. The results were exactly what I expected. Molly texted me every few days with updates about house hunting. She'd send photos of properties they were considering and mention how excited her kids were about having a bigger backyard. The subtext was always the same: they'd found the perfect house but needed help with the down payment to make it happen. My mom called twice asking if I'd had time to think about Molly's situation. She emphasized how important it was for the grandchildren to have adequate space and good schools. She also mentioned how proud they all were of my success and how much they regretted losing touch over the years. Drake sent me a LinkedIn connection request and started sharing articles about successful entrepreneurs who helped family members invest in real estate. His posts were clearly targeted at me, discussing how family support created generational wealth. But the most revealing incident happened 2 weeks after their visit. My cousin Elsa, who'd originally spotted my truck, called me directly. She said Molly had been asking detailed questions about my business and personal life. Molly wanted to know how much money I made, what my house was worth, and whether I was married or had kids who might inherit my wealth someday. Elsa also mentioned that Molly had been telling other family members about my success. According to her, I was now being described as the family member who'd made it big in business. This was a dramatic shift from 8 years of being treated like the family failure. The most interesting part of Elsa's call was learning about my family's financial situation. Molly and Drake weren't just looking for a down payment, they were in serious debt. Drake had made several bad investment decisions, including putting money into a failed startup and buying cryptocurrency at its peak. They owed $35,000 on credit cards and had borrowed money from Drake's parents twice in the past year. My parents weren't in great shape either. My dad's retirement savings had taken a hit during the market downturn, and my mom's part-time job barely covered their increased medical expenses. They'd been talking about selling their house and moving into a smaller place. This information changed everything. The family visit wasn't just about helping with a down payment, they were all struggling financially and saw me as their solution. I decided to test their sincerity. I called Molly and suggested meeting for coffee to discuss their situation. She was excited and suggested we meet at an upscale cafe near her house. When I arrived, she was already there with a folder of house listings and a notebook full of financial calculations. She'd prepared a detailed presentation about their housing needs, including photos of their current cramped conditions and research about property values in better neighborhoods. She explained how the investment would benefit everyone: their kids would have better opportunities, the property would appreciate in value, and I'd be helping family during a difficult time. When I asked about their debt situation, Molly's demeanor changed immediately. She became defensive and said everyone had financial challenges these days. She insisted their credit card debt was manageable and would be resolved once Drake's career stabilized. I told her I needed more information before making any decisions. I asked to see their tax returns, credit reports, and a detailed budget showing how they planned to repay the loan. Molly's reaction was immediate anger. She said I was treating her like a bank instead of family. She accused me of being suspicious and cold, nothing like the brother she remembered. This reaction told me everything I needed to know. Someone genuinely asking for help would welcome the opportunity to provide financial documentation. Someone looking for a handout would react exactly like Molly did. The coffee meeting ended badly. Molly packed up her materials and said she was disappointed in how I'd changed. She mentioned that success had made me forget about family values and treating people with trust and respect. 2 days later, I received a group text from my mom addressed to Molly, Drake, my dad, and me. The message said she was heartbroken that her children couldn't work together during difficult times. She emphasized how short life was and how important it was to prioritize family over money. My dad followed up with his own message saying he was ashamed that his son would treat his sister like a business transaction instead of helping family unconditionally. These messages confirmed what I'd suspected. My family's reconciliation attempt was entirely conditional on me providing financial assistance. When I asked for basic financial information that any responsible lender would require, I became the villain who cared more about money than family. The irony was incredible. For 8 years, they'd excluded me from their lives because they didn't respect my career choices. Now they were angry because I wouldn't hand over the money that career had generated without asking reasonable questions. I decided to respond with facts instead of emotion. I sent a group message listing every family event I'd been excluded from over the past 8 years. I included dates, occasions, and the fact that Molly's children had never met me despite living in the same state. I pointed out that their sudden interest in rebuilding our relationship coincided perfectly with discovering my financial success. I ended the message by saying I was willing to help family members who genuinely wanted a relationship, but I wouldn't be used as a bank by people who treated me like I didn't exist for nearly a decade. The responses were immediate and revealing. Molly accused me of holding grudges and being unable to forgive past mistakes. Drake sent a private message saying I was being unreasonable and that family should help each other without conditions. My mom called crying, saying I was tearing the family apart over money. She insisted they'd always loved me but had respected my desire for independence. According to her version of events, I'd chosen to distance myself from the family, and they'd simply given me the space I seemed to want. This rewriting of history was the final proof I needed. Instead of acknowledging their treatment of me or taking responsibility for 8 years of exclusion, they were making themselves the victims of my unreasonable behavior. I blocked their phone numbers and social media accounts. The drama was affecting my work and personal life, and I'd gotten all the information I needed about their true intentions. 3 days after blocking them, Elsa called again. She said Molly had been telling everyone I'd refused to help despite having plenty of money. According to Molly's version, I demanded financial documents like they were strangers instead of treating them like family. My mom had been calling other relatives asking them to intervene and convince me to reconsider. She was portraying the situation as a successful family member abandoning his struggling relatives out of greed and selfishness. The family narrative had shifted again. I'd gone from being the family failure to the family success story to the family villain in the span of 3 weeks. Elsa also mentioned something interesting. Molly had started a GoFundMe campaign for their house down payment. The campaign description mentioned unexpected family medical expenses and job instability, but didn't mention their debt or poor financial decisions. Several relatives had contributed small amounts, but the campaign was nowhere near its $75,000 goal. I realized my family's behavior followed a clear pattern. When I was struggling to establish my career, they excluded me because I didn't meet their definition of success. When I became successful, they wanted access to my money. When I asked reasonable questions about lending them money, they painted me as the problem. At no point in this entire process had anyone expressed genuine interest in rebuilding a relationship without financial benefit. No one had apologized for 8 years of exclusion or acknowledged how their treatment had affected me. I'm done trying to prove myself to people who only value me for what I can provide them financially. Update 2: I thought the family drama was over after blocking their contacts, but I was wrong. The situation escalated in ways I never expected. Last month, I was working late in my shop when I noticed a car parked across the street from my property. At first, I assumed it was someone lost or having car trouble. But the same car appeared 3 more times that week, always in the evening, always with someone sitting inside watching my house. The 4th time I saw it, I walked outside to investigate. The car drove away quickly, but I recognized the license plate. It belonged to Drake's SUV. My brother-in-law was apparently conducting surveillance on my property. I installed additional security cameras around my property and started documenting the incidents. Over the next 2 weeks, Drake's car appeared 6 more times. Sometimes Molly was with him. Once, I saw them taking photos of my house and workshop from the street. The harassment escalated when Molly started showing up at my business location. My shop is in an industrial area, and customers typically make appointments before visiting. Molly began appearing during business hours, claiming she just wanted to talk and work things out. My employees were confused about who she was and why she kept showing up uninvited. I had to explain the situation to my foreman so he'd know not to let her into the shop area where expensive customer vehicles were stored. The 3rd time Molly appeared at my business, she brought her kids. She told my receptionist that the children wanted to see where Uncle Marcus worked. This was clearly an attempt to use emotional manipulation and create a scene if I refused to see them. I came out to the waiting area and told Molly she needed to make an appointment if she wanted to discuss business matters. She became loud and emotional, saying I was being cruel to her children who just wanted to meet their uncle. Other customers were watching, which was exactly what she wanted. I had to ask her to leave and threatened to call security if she returned without an appointment. Molly left crying, telling her kids that Uncle Marcus was too busy to spend time with them. 2 days later, my business received a scathing Google review from an account with Drake's name. The review claimed my shop provided poor customer service and treated potential clients with disrespect. It mentioned how I'd been rude to a woman with young children who was simply asking questions about automotive services. I responded professionally to the review, explaining that the person in question was not a potential customer but a family member who had been asked to make an appointment like everyone else. I also noted that we maintain strict safety protocols that prevent unauthorized people from entering work areas. Drake deleted the review after my response made it clear what had actually happened, but not before several other fake reviews appeared from newly created accounts. All of them mentioned poor treatment of families and unprofessional behavior toward women with children. I had to spend hours documenting the fake reviews and contacting Google to have them removed. This was time I should have been spending on my business, but instead I was dealing with family members trying to sabotage my reputation. The situation reached its peak 3 weeks ago when I came home to find my driveway blocked by my parents' car. They were sitting on my front porch waiting for me to return from work. When I pulled up, they stood and walked toward my truck like they planned to prevent me from leaving. My dad started talking before I even got out of the vehicle. He said they'd driven 4 hours to have an adult conversation about the family situation. He insisted that we needed to resolve things face to face like mature people. I told them they were trespassing and needed to leave immediately. My mom started crying and said she couldn't believe I'd threatened to call police on my own parents. She said all they wanted was to understand why I was being so stubborn about helping Molly's family. My dad took a different approach. He said I'd obviously forgotten where I came from and who had supported me growing up. According to him, they'd sacrificed plenty over the years to raise me, and now I was being selfish when they needed something in return. This was the same man who'd told me I was wasting my potential when I chose automotive work over college. The same person who'd ignored my achievements and made me feel unwelcome at family gatherings for years. I recorded the conversation on my phone while telling them repeatedly to leave my property. My dad became increasingly agitated, saying I was being disrespectful and threatening. My mom kept crying and saying she didn't understand how her son had become so cold. Finally, I called the police. When my parents realized I was serious about having them arrested for trespassing, they left. But not before my dad said I'd regret treating family this way and that they wouldn't forget how I'd chosen money over blood relatives. The next day, I received a certified letter from an attorney representing Molly and Drake. The letter claimed I'd made verbal commitments to help with their house purchase and demanded that I honor those commitments or face legal action for promissory fraud. This was completely false. I'd never promised them money, either verbally or in writing. Every conversation had been about considering their request, not agreeing to it. The letter was clearly meant to intimidate me into paying them to avoid legal hassles. I forwarded the letter to my own attorney, who called it frivolous and potentially sanctionable. He sent a response documenting the actual facts of our interactions and warning that any lawsuit would result in counterclaims for harassment and abusive process. Molly and Drake's attorney never responded. Either they'd been told the case had no merit, or they'd realized I had documentation proving their claims were false. But the legal threat revealed something important about my family's mindset. They genuinely believed they were entitled to my money and saw my refusal as some kind of breach of contract. In their view, being related to me created an automatic right to financial support. Elsa called again last week with more information about what my family had been telling other relatives. According to their version of events, I'd promised to help Molly buy a house but then changed my mind out of spite. They were telling people that my success had made me arrogant and that I'd forgotten my family's support during my struggling years. The irony was staggering. They'd provided no support during my actual struggling years and had actively excluded me from family relationships. But now they were claiming credit for my success and portraying themselves as victims of my ingratitude. Elsa also mentioned that Molly and Drake had lost the house they wanted to buy. Their financing fell through when the bank discovered their debt levels and poor credit history. According to Elsa, they were blaming me for the lost opportunity instead of taking responsibility for their own financial decisions. My parents had started telling relatives that I was financially stable enough to help but was refusing out of stubbornness. My mom was particularly active in spreading this narrative, calling cousins and aunts to discuss how disappointed she was in my behavior. The family gossip network was now portraying me as the villain who'd abandoned his struggling relatives. None of them mentioned the 8 years of exclusion or the fact that their reconciliation attempt was entirely motivated by discovering my financial success. I realized this pattern would never end. As long as my family saw me as a source of money rather than a person, they'd continue finding ways to pressure, manipulate, and harass me into giving them what they wanted. I made the decision to cut contact completely. I changed my business phone number and had my attorney send cease and desist letters to Molly, Drake, and my parents. The letters documented their harassment and warned of legal action if they continued contacting me or my business. I also hired a private investigator to document their surveillance activities around my property. Having professional documentation would be useful if I needed restraining orders or had to file criminal charges. The hardest part was accepting that my family would never see me as anything more than a potential source of money. Every interaction had been transactional, even when disguised as emotional appeals about family relationships. Update 3: It's been 6 months since my last update, and I wanted to close out this story with what's happened since then. The cease and desist letters worked initially. Molly, Drake, and my parents stopped showing up at my house and business. The fake Google reviews stopped appearing, and I didn't see any more surveillance vehicles around my property. But the peace only lasted about 2 months before they found new ways to cause problems. In December, I started getting calls from vendors and suppliers asking about my family's claims that I'd agreed to guarantee their purchases. Molly had apparently been telling appliance stores and furniture companies that her wealthy brother would be covering their house expenses. Several businesses called to verify these arrangements before extending credit. I had to contact each vendor individually to explain that I'd never agreed to guarantee anything and wouldn't be responsible for any debts my family might incur. Most businesses were understanding once I explained the situation, but it was embarrassing and time-consuming. My attorney sent another letter warning about fraudulent use of my name for credit purposes. This seemed to stop the vendor calls, but it showed how far my family was willing to go to access money they felt entitled to. In January, something happened that changed my perspective on the entire situation. Elsa called to tell me that my grandfather's house was being sold. He'd passed away 6 years ago, and the property had been sitting empty because my grandmother couldn't bear to clean it out. My grandmother had finally decided to sell, and Elsa thought I might want some of my grandfather's tools before everything went to estate sale. I'd learned automotive work in that garage, and those tools held real meaning for me. I drove to Phoenix and met Elsa at the house. Walking into my grandfather's workshop brought back memories of every weekend I'd spent there learning skills that eventually built my career. His workbench was exactly as he'd left it, covered with the tools he'd used to teach me everything about engines and repair work. Elsa mentioned that none of my immediate family had shown interest in my grandfather's belongings. Molly had asked if anything was valuable enough to sell, but hadn't wanted any of his tools or personal items. My parents had taken a few photos and some jewelry for my mom, but left everything else. This struck me as the perfect summary of how my family viewed practical skills and hands-on work. Even my grandfather's tools, which represented decades of knowledge and craftsmanship, were only interesting to them as potential sources of cash. I spent the day loading my grandfather's equipment into my truck. Hand tools, specialty wrenches, diagnostic equipment he'd collected over 40 years of professional mechanic work. These tools were worth more to me than any amount of money my family could have borrowed. While packing, I found something unexpected. My grandfather had kept a scrapbook with photos and newspaper clippings about my business success. Elsa had apparently been sending him updates over the years, including articles from the local business journal about my company's growth. There were photos of cars I'd restored, printed from my business website. Articles about my shop winning awards for quality work. Even a photo of my house that Elsa had taken when the local paper did a feature on successful young entrepreneurs. My grandfather had been proud of my achievements, even though he'd passed away before I reached my current level of success. He'd kept track of my progress through Elsa because my parents never mentioned my accomplishments during their visits. Finding that scrapbook hit me harder than any of the family drama from the past year. The person who'd taught me everything about automotive work, who'd encouraged my interest in hands-on skills when my parents dismissed it, had been following my career and celebrating my success from a distance. I realized that seeking approval from people who fundamentally didn't respect my choices was pointless. My grandfather's pride in my work meant more than anything my parents or Molly could say or do. After loading the tools, I made a decision that surprised even me. I called my business insurance company and added Molly and Drake's kids to my policy as beneficiaries for a small life insurance provision. Not because I owed their parents anything, but because those kids shouldn't suffer for their parents' poor decisions. I didn't tell Molly about this arrangement, and I made sure the policy couldn't be accessed or borrowed against while I'm alive. But if something happens to me, her children will have money for their education or whatever they need as adults. This felt like the right way to handle family responsibility, helping the next generation without rewarding the bad behavior of the current one. I also established a scholarship fund at the local trade school in my grandfather's name. Students studying automotive technology can apply for financial assistance with their education costs. This creates something positive for my success while honoring the person who actually supported my career path. Since January, my family has made a few more attempts to contact me, but nothing like the harassment from last year. Molly sent a birthday card in February with a note saying she hoped we could eventually work things out. My mom left a voicemail on Mother's Day saying she missed me and hoped I was doing well. These messages felt different from their earlier demands and emotional manipulation. Maybe they'd finally realized that their approach had been counterproductive, or maybe they'd found other solutions to their financial problems. I haven't responded to any of these contacts, but they don't make me angry anymore. I understand now that their behavior reflected their own limitations and values, not any actual deficiency on my part. My business continues growing. Last month, I completed a restoration on a 1963 Ferrari that sold for $400,000. The owner was so pleased that he commissioned me to work on 2 more vehicles from his collection. I've also been dating someone for the past 4 months. Sarah works as a veterinarian and has her own successful practice. She understands the satisfaction of building something through your own skills and effort. When I told her about my family situation, she wasn't shocked or judgmental, she just said some people don't appreciate what they have until they lose it. We spend most weekends working on projects together. She's learning basic automotive skills, and I'm helping her renovate the barn on her property for a larger animal recovery area. It's nice having someone who values the same things I do. Looking back on everything that happened, I don't regret cutting contact with my family. They made it clear that their interest in me was purely financial, and their behavior when I asked reasonable questions proved they weren't serious about rebuilding genuine relationships. The hardest part was letting go of the hope that they might eventually see me as a person rather than just a source of money. But finding my grandfather's scrapbook helped me understand that the people who mattered had always supported me, even when I didn't know it. I'm planning to expand my business next year, possibly opening a second location or adding a museum space to display some of the classic cars I've restored. These are the kinds of decisions I can make now that I'm not wasting energy on family drama or trying to prove my worth to people who were never going to appreciate it anyway. Sometimes family isn't about blood relationships. Sometimes it's about the people who respect your choices, support your goals, and value you for who you are rather than what you can provide them. My grandfather understood that. Sarah understands that. My employees understand that. That's enough family for me. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. My wife cheated on me with her rich boss and called me pathetic for living with my uncle, but he left me everything when he passed away. Now she is sorry and wants to come back. I, 26M, was raised by my uncle Jacob, 49M, after my parents died in a plane crash when I was 8. They were flying to attend a business conference when their small private plane went down due to bad weather. Uncle Jacob was my dad's only sibling, and he didn't hesitate to take me in. He never married or had kids of his own, saying his work kept him too busy, but I think he just never found the right person. He ran a hardware store that my grandfather had started, and it was his pride and joy. Growing up with Uncle Jacob was different from having parents, but he did his best. He came to every school event, helped with homework, and taught me everything from fixing a leaky faucet to managing money. He worked long hours at the store but always made time for me. When I was younger, I used to do my homework at the store after school, sitting behind the counter while he helped customers. As I got older, I started helping out too, learning the business from the ground up. I met Megan, 25F, last year at a local coffee shop where she worked as a barista. I'd stop there every morning before work, and we started talking. She was beautiful, funny, and seemed down to earth. She'd recently moved to our city from a small town, trying to start fresh. Her background story touched me. Her dad left when she was young, and her mom worked multiple jobs to support them. She told me how watching her mom struggle made her determined to build a better life. We started dating, and things moved pretty quickly. Megan was different from other girls I'd dated. She was ambitious and always talked about her dreams of opening her own business someday. I admired that about her. Uncle Jacob liked her too, always making sure to include her in our family dinners and treating her like part of the family. I work as a junior architect at a local firm. The pay is decent, but housing costs in our area are insane. Uncle Jacob insisted I stay with him even after I got the job, saying it made sense to save money for the future. When Megan and I got serious about marriage after dating for a year, he extended the same offer to her. He said we could live with him until we saved enough for our own place. The wedding was small but perfect. We held it in Uncle Jacob's backyard, where he'd helped me build a pergola for the occasion. Megan seemed happy with the simple ceremony, even though her mom couldn't make it due to work. Uncle Jacob walked her down the aisle since she didn't have her dad in the picture. Things were good for the first 2 months of marriage. We had our own space in the house. Uncle Jacob had converted the entire upstairs into a separate living area for us, complete with a small kitchen. He gave us privacy but was always there if we needed anything. I thought we were building a good life together, saving money while working towards our goals. The changes started when Megan got a job at Drake's, 45M, this upscale restaurant downtown. Drake Cooper was known in our city for his successful restaurants and flashy lifestyle. Megan was excited about the job, saying the tips would be great and she might even learn about running a business. At first, the late nights didn't bother me. She'd come home talking about how busy the restaurant was and how the extra hours meant more money. But then I started noticing changes. New designer bags appeared in our closet. She began wearing expensive jewelry she claimed were gifts from her new work friends. When I asked about the cost, she'd get defensive and say I was being controlling. The comments about our living situation started next. She'd make snide remarks about how her coworkers had their own places. She'd compare our life to the lifestyle Drake and his rich friends enjoyed. When I reminded her we were saving for our future, she'd say I lacked ambition and was too dependent on my uncle. Uncle Jacob noticed the changes too. He overheard her on the phone once, complaining to someone about living with an old man. It hurt him, I could tell, but he never said anything to her. He just told me to be careful and make sure I was happy. The truth came out in the worst way possible. Amy, one of the servers at Drake's, messaged me on Facebook 3 weeks ago. She sent me pictures and videos of Megan with Drake, them kissing outside expensive restaurants, holding hands at hotel entrances, getting into his car late at night. The worst part was learning that Drake had set Megan up in a luxury apartment near the restaurant, where they'd meet when he told his wife he was working late. Amy explained that she couldn't stay quiet anymore. Apparently, Megan had been bragging to coworkers about how Drake bought her whatever she wanted. She even showed off the key to the apartment, joking about being a kept woman. Amy included screenshots of texts where Megan called me pathetic for still living with my uncle. When I confronted Megan, her reaction shocked me. She didn't cry or apologize. Instead, she laughed and said she was surprised it took me this long to find out. She said living with my uncle made her feel like she was stuck in a retirement home. She called me a mama's boy who couldn't cut the apron strings. According to her, Drake was a real man who could take care of a woman properly. Uncle Jacob heard the whole confrontation. He came upstairs when the shouting started, worried things might get physical. Megan took one look at him and sneered, saying she was done pretending to be the perfect little wife in our boring little family. She packed a bag and left, saying her new life with Drake was better than playing house with a boy and his uncle. The next day, Uncle Jacob wanted to go confront Drake and tell his wife everything. It took me hours to talk him down. I didn't want more drama, I just wanted out of the marriage. I filed for divorce the same week. Since we'd only been married for 6 months and had no joint assets, my lawyer said it should be straightforward. The hardest part has been dealing with mutual friends who think I should forgive her. They say marriage is about working through problems and that everyone deserves a second chance. But how do you forgive someone who not only cheated but also insulted the person who raised you? Who took advantage of our hospitality while sleeping with another man? Uncle Jacob has been my rock through all this. He keeps reminding me that real love isn't about money or status. He says Megan showed her true colors, and I'm better off learning this now than years down the road. I know he's right, but it still hurts. I'm sticking to my decision to divorce her. Am I making the right choice? Update 1: Life has a way of throwing unexpected curveballs at you. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, Everything changed again. My Uncle Jacob had a massive heart attack 3 days ago. He collapsed at the store while helping a customer find plumbing supplies. One of our regular customers, Mr. Peterson, was there and called 911 immediately, but it was too late. The doctor said it was sudden and there was nothing they could have done. They mentioned something about a blocked artery, but honestly, I was too shocked to process all the medical details. The last conversation I had with him keeps playing in my head. It was at breakfast that morning. We were talking about ordering new inventory for the store, and he was teaching me about managing supplier relationships. He seemed fine, maybe a little tired, but nothing unusual. He even joked about how I needed to learn all this because he wouldn't be around forever to run the store. I never thought those words would become reality so soon. The house feels empty without him. I keep expecting to hear him whistling in the kitchen or the sound of his favorite old armchair creaking. His coffee mug is still in the dish rack where he left it that morning. I can't bring myself to move it. The morning paper he was reading is still folded on the kitchen table, open to the crossword puzzle he never got to finish. Yesterday, his lawyer, Mr. Richardson, contacted me about the will. We've known Mr. Richardson for years. He and Uncle Jacob went to high school together. When I arrived at his office, he looked like he'd been crying too. It turns out Uncle Jacob had updated his will just a month ago, right after everything happened with Megan. He left everything to me, the house, his savings, and the hardware store. I had no idea he'd even been thinking about this. Mr. Richardson handed me a letter Uncle Jacob had written the week before his death. The envelope had for my son written on it in his messy handwriting. Inside, he wrote about how proud he was of me, not just for how I handled the situation with Megan, but for the man I'd become. He said taking me in after my parents died was the best decision he ever made. He wrote about how watching me grow up gave his life purpose and meaning. The inheritance isn't what most people would consider wealthy, but it's significant. The house is fully paid off. Uncle Jacob never believed in mortgages. The hardware store has been profitable for decades, with a loyal customer base. There's also a decent amount in savings and investments. Uncle Jacob was always smart with money, living simply and investing consistently. He wrote in the letter that he wanted me to have a solid foundation to build my life on. While all this was happening, drama was unfolding on Megan's side. Drake's wife, Patricia, apparently hired a private investigator after finding suspicious charges on their joint credit cards. The pie uncovered multiple affairs, including the one with Megan. According to Amy, who still keeps me updated, Drake's wife showed up at the restaurant during dinner service and caused a huge scene. She threw printed photos of Drake with various women, including Megan, all over the dining room. Drake, trying to save his marriage and his reputation, immediately cut ties with everyone involved. He kicked Megan out of the luxury apartment, changed the locks, and canceled all the credit cards he'd given her. The restaurant staff watched as Megan begged him not to do this, crying about having nowhere to go. He told her to never contact him again. Amy says Megan's been staying at the Red Moon Motel on the outskirts of town. It's not the kind of place she was bragging about living in a few weeks ago. She tried applying at other upscale restaurants, but word has spread about what happened at Drake's, and no one wants to hire her. I heard she's been calling mutual friends, telling them she made a mistake and asking about me, but no one's telling her about Uncle Jacob yet. I've taken over running the hardware store. Had to close it for a few days after Uncle Jacob's death, but the regular customers have been incredibly supportive. Many of them knew him for decades and have shared stories about him that I'd never heard before. Like how he used to help elderly customers install their purchases for free, or how he kept a tab running for people who were going through tough times. Going through his office at the store has been both painful and enlightening. Uncle Jacob kept meticulous records of everything. I found notebooks dating back 20 years, detailing every business decision he made. There were also personal notes about me, report cards, drawings I made as a kid, even the architectural plans for my first school project. He'd saved everything. The house feels different now. Every corner holds memories of him. The garage where he taught me to use tools, the kitchen where we had our morning coffee, the living room where we watched baseball games together. I've been sleeping in the guest room because I can't bring myself to change anything in his room yet. His clothes still hang in the closet, his reading glasses still sit on the nightstand. The divorce proceedings are moving forward. My lawyer says Megan hasn't contested anything so far. Maybe she realizes she has no grounds to demand anything after what she did. Or maybe she's too preoccupied with her own problems right now. Either way, I'm grateful for one less complication during this difficult time. I miss him so much it hurts. But running the store helps. It's like keeping a piece of him alive. The regular customers tell me I remind them of him, especially when I'm helping someone find exactly what they need. I guess all those years of watching him work really paid off. I'm determined to keep his legacy going, to run the business with the same integrity and kindness he showed everyone. Update 2: yesterday was one of the hardest days since Uncle Jacob's passing. Megan showed up at the house unannounced around dinner time. She looked different from the last time I saw her, no designer clothes or expensive jewelry, just jeans and a plain sweater. Her eyes were puffy from crying, and she'd lost weight. She stood on the porch, holding a small photo album from our wedding, saying she'd heard about Uncle Jacob's death and the inheritance through mutual friends. At first, I didn't want to let her in, but some part of me wanted to hear what she had to say. Maybe I needed closure, or maybe I just wanted to see if she'd changed at all. We sat in the living room, the same room where she used to complain about living with my uncle, where she once called this house a retirement home. She started crying immediately, saying she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. She talked about how young and stupid she'd been, how Drake had filled her head with promises and dreams of a luxurious life. She claimed she'd realized what really matters after everything fell apart with Drake. Megan told me about how Drake had kicked her out of the apartment with barely an hour to pack. How his wife had threatened to sue her for alienation of affection. She lost her job at the restaurant, and no other upscale place would hire her because of the scandal. She'd been staying at that cheap motel, working at a gas station to afford the weekly rate. Then she brought up memories of our wedding day. She talked about how happy we were, dancing in Uncle Jacob's backyard under the pergola we built. She mentioned how kind Uncle Jacob had been to her, walking her down the aisle when her own family couldn't be there. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then came the real reason for her visit. She started talking about how we could make things work now. How with the inheritance, we could live comfortably in the house. She suggested running the hardware store together, saying she had experience in customer service. She even talked about having kids and raising them in this house, making Uncle Jacob proud. That's when everything became clear. Nothing had really changed, she was still the same materialistic person who'd cheated on me. She wasn't sorry for hurting me or disrespecting Uncle Jacob. She was sorry her plan with Drake hadn't worked out, and now she was looking for her next safe landing. I told her to leave and never come back. I said the divorce would proceed as planned, and if she tried to contest it now, I'd make sure everyone in town knew the details of her affair with Drake. I told her Uncle Jacob had updated his will right after finding out about her cheating, and that he'd seen right through her act. She got angry then, showing her true colors again. Called me vindictive and said I was just like my uncle, too stubborn to give people second chances. She said I was being cruel, that people make mistakes and deserve forgiveness. Then she tried a different approach, saying since we were still legally married when Uncle Jacob died, she might be entitled to some of the inheritance. I laughed at that. My lawyer had already confirmed that Uncle Jacob's will was ironclad, and given the documented infidelity, she had no claim to anything. When she realized she wasn't getting anywhere, she started threatening to tell people I'd abused her, that living with Uncle Jacob had been like prison. The divorce was finalized last week. Megan tried claiming she deserved alimony since she was unemployed, but given our short marriage and the evidence of her affair, the judge denied her claim. She's been telling mutual friends that I'm heartless, that I'm enjoying watching her suffer. She even tried spreading rumors that Uncle Jacob had left her something in the will but I was hiding it. Some mutual friends think I'm being too harsh. They say people can change if given the chance, that marriage is about forgiveness. But they didn't see how she acted when she thought she had a wealthy man on the hook. They didn't hear her mocking Uncle Jacob or calling me pathetic for being close to him. Amy from the restaurant told me Megan's been hanging around Drake's other restaurants, hoping to run into him. Apparently, she still thinks she can win him back, even though he's trying to save his marriage. Some people never learn. Last I heard, she's dating another restaurant owner, someone older with money. Seems like she's sticking to her pattern. Update 3 Life has settled into a new normal, though getting here wasn't easy. The hardware store is doing better than ever. I've started implementing some of the updates Uncle Jacob had planned but never got around to. Found his old notebook with ideas for modernizing the inventory system and expanding the plumbing section. It's like he left me a roadmap to follow. The regular customers seem to appreciate that I'm keeping his vision alive while making small improvements. Old Mr. Peterson, who was there when Uncle Jacob had his heart attack, stops by almost daily now. He doesn't always buy anything, just comes to chat and share stories about Uncle Jacob from before I was born. Through these conversations, I'm learning new things about my uncle, like how he helped several local businesses get started by extending them credit during tough times. Megan still tries to contact me, though less frequently now. She creates fake social media accounts to message me or gets mutual friends to pass along messages. Last week, she had someone drop off a letter at the store. I didn't read it, just threw it away like all the others. Amy keeps me updated about Megan's life, though I never ask. She's dating some 55-year-old restaurant owner from the next town over. Apparently, he's going through a divorce and has been showing Megan off at expensive restaurants. Some things never change. I finally gathered the courage to deal with Uncle Jacob's room last month. I couldn't leave it untouched forever, though part of me wanted to. I've turned it into a home office, but kept some things exactly as they were, his old photographs on the walls, his collection of baseball caps hanging by the door, and his favorite chair by the window. The rest of his clothes and personal items, I donated to a local shelter, except for his work shirts with the store logo. Those are hanging in my closet now. Last week, while going through the last of his things in the attic, I found an old photo album I'd never seen before. It was full of pictures from before the plane crash, photos of my parents with Uncle Jacob, all of them young and happy. There were pictures of Uncle Jacob holding me as a baby, playing with me in the park, and one of all of us at my parents' last Christmas. Finding these photos hit hard, but in a good way. It reminded me that even though I lost my parents, I was lucky enough to have an uncle who stepped up and became a father to me. The hardware store's customer base has grown. I took Uncle Jacob's advice from his notebooks and started a basic website where people can check our inventory. The older customers still prefer coming in to ask questions and get recommendations, which is fine by me. I like continuing Uncle Jacob's tradition of taking time with each customer, making sure they get exactly what they need. Some nights, I sit in Uncle Jacob's old chair by the window, looking out at the backyard where I got married. The pergola still stands, though the flowers Megan wanted are long gone. I've planted some of Uncle Jacob's favorite vegetables instead. He always talked about starting a garden but never got around to it. Yesterday, one of Uncle Jacob's old friends from high school stopped by the store. He looked around, nodding approvingly at the changes, then told me Uncle Jacob would be proud. Not just of how I'm running the store, but of how I've handled everything life has thrown at me. Coming from someone who knew Uncle Jacob so long, it meant a lot. I miss him every day, but I'm no longer drowning in grief. Instead, I'm trying to live the way he taught me, with integrity, compassion, and self-respect. His lessons about what really matters in life got me through the mess with Megan, and they're still guiding me now. Some people might call it old-fashioned, but Uncle Jacob's values haven't steered me wrong yet.